This is Career Competitor, and it is the podcast that believes we all have a competitive self that drives our optimal performance in our careers and within our lives. My name is Steve Mellor, and in the past 15 years, having been a coach to high performers, Olympians, business owners, executives across all walks of life, I have come to find that competitiveness comes from within. And I'm going to be using this podcast to really showcase how competitors from all walks of life are finding optimal performance and have built the careers that they have today. Hello there, and welcome into this episode of Career Competitor, where I have the pleasure of welcoming in Maria Parker. And Maria's going to get the introduction that she certainly deserves here in just a moment. But just three things to look out for within our discussion today. Firstly, we're going to dive into the topic of identity, in how there are different things required of us at different times, depending on what life is throwing at us. Secondly, we're going to talk about Maria's ability to persist through difficulty, understanding that it is, in fact, something we do strategically. In other words, knowing when to persist. And finally, we're going to dive into her new book, Do Tough, and how it was her physical and emotional response to a phase of grief in her life unlike any other, and how we all have the opportunity to respond in whatever way we need to in order to handle the adversities life can throw at us. Now, one other thing I have to mention as well before I introduce Maria is that she is a fellow podcaster. In fact, she co-hosts a podcast with a former guest of mine, Kelly Palace, and we didn't get to it, really. We didn't discuss it at all within the interview, so I'm giving the ladies a shout-out, Champions Mojo. Go check it out right here at the front end of the episode, but don't go check out any of their stuff until you've given this episode a good listen first. So we have the multifaceted Maria Parker coming up here today. But before we get started, let me remind you to take the time to be subscribing to the show, to also facilitate in the growth of the show. That's right, I cannot do it alone. I need your help. If you enjoy what you're hearing, tell someone. Don't hold it to yourself. Don't leave Career Competitor as your best kept secret. Share the knowledge, share the insights, share the impact that you're taking from these episodes. And if you enjoy anything and you feel the need to share it on a public platform, don't forget to tag me at Career Competitor, and be sure to give me a look on LinkedIn too. Just search for my name, Steve Mellor, and you can tag me, you can message me, you can reach out to me, and you can do that as well through obviously the website, careercompetitor.com, or via the email, steve@careercompetitor.com. So many ways to get in touch, so many ways to be sharing the show, but for now, we're going to dive right into our episode for today. Okay, our career competitor today is the CEO at Cruise Bike, a company that produces recumbent bikes, allowing people to experience the joy and freedom of cycling without the discomfort associated with traditional bicycles. Furthermore, not only does our guest run this company, but she is an ultra-endurance cyclist enthusiast, and it just so happens her bikes are the ideal bike for 3,000-mile journeys that she has been known to go on. Arguably, even more impressive is the incredible work our guest does as the volunteer executive director at 3,000 Miles to a Cure, a not-for-profit organization founded 10 years ago whose mission is to end brain cancer by raising the necessary funds for research. And as we speak today, yesterday, our guest released her first book titled Do Tough, which, having read the book already myself, is her gorgeous account of how the heartbreak of losing her sister to brain cancer sparked her mission to participate in Race Across America back in 2013, a book that captures the parallels of toughness associated both with life and physical challenges. She is a devoted mother and grandmother. She is a former client of mine, which we may touch on a little bit here today, and I'm proud to hold her as someone I consider to be a friend as well. Please welcome to Career Competitor, the magnificent Maria Parker. Maria, how are you?
Magnificent is a terrific
There you go. Magnificent.
Oh, thanks, Steve. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely. You needed an introduction that you deserved, and I was glad to give it. And I think people are going to be able to tell very quickly within this discussion that this is not the first time that we've spoke. And as I alluded to there in the introduction too, you were a client of mine. You were a client of mine very early on within my business. It's one thing that I always have such appreciation for. But at the same time, you have so much to bring to the show. You have so much about your career. I happen to know you are a true competitor in all phases of life, and I'm excited to dive into that. And of course, we're going to dive into the book today a little bit. But one thing I always like people to just simply know is tell us a little bit about who you are in terms of just a typical day in the life of Maria Parker at the moment.
Well, who I am has changed a lot over the years. And I think that's one thing that I didn't really realize as a young person, that I would have this expanse of time to be different things at different times. Right now, as I'll tell anybody who will listen, one of my most important jobs is to be a grandmother. I have 8 grandchildren, and I just I love them, and I love being around them. I get to live near 6 of them, and actually all 8 are close by these days for a short time. So anyway, that's really great. And of course, I'm a wife. I love my husband of 38 years, Jim. And then the other things have been just such a delight. As CEO of Cruise Bike has been, such an incredible thing. I remember one of the things I talk about in the book is identity, and like, how do you take on an identity? And one of the things you do is you say what you are. So I was, I say I'm a writer, which is funny because, the first few times I said it, it's like, am I a writer? Yeah, I guess I'm a writer. I wrote a book. And the same thing with being an athlete. Kelly taught me, my sister-in-law, who was our mutual friend, and also the co-host of the podcast that I do called Champions Mojo. She taught me to call myself an athlete, because as I was, I tell people I'm an adult onset athlete because I didn't do athletics as a young person. And I, for a long time I was running and cycling and doing things. And Kelly, I forget, we were talking about being an athlete. I said, well, I'm not really an athlete. And she said, she can just describe my day and how I work out and how I compete. She said, Maria, I think you're an athlete. I started thinking of myself as an athlete, calling myself an athlete, even giggling a little bit. I'm an athlete, like I'm a writer. but that changes. That does change your perception of yourself. And when you call yourself an athlete, that means you do get up and work out, and you do watch your diet, and you do, and you try to be the best you can be. And if you're a writer, you write. You express yourself in the written word. And if you're a grandmother, you're grandmother. So the day in the life, that didn't really answer the question. I right now I'm away from home, doing my identity as a wife. I'm following Jim, who's doing a 6-week sort of stint working away from home, and so I'm just with him to support him. And of course, a hotel room provides a great place to write and do the other things. I can manage the company, the cruise bike company, from here. So I get up, I work out. I usually do cruise bike stuff in the morning, and then I do 3,000 miles to a cure stuff in the afternoon, and grandmother and other stuff, later in the day.
Well, one of the first things you said there, different things at different times, and I think that's a really it's an insight of encouragement to anybody that's listening. I think sometimes it's, especially with this, I love that you've started here on identity. I think it's a great place for us to start. Because the thing with identity, sometimes people want it to be so black and white to where it's just, this is me, and there is no other version of me. And it's like, well, there's identities are deep. They're very deep, and they're multifaceted. And it's okay that they're that too, because that actually incorporates some of our flaws. And it's okay to have flaws. All these sort of elements that, when it comes to positioning yourself in life to become a business owner or to become a CEO, as you are, or to go down this path of writing a book, and then to get to a point where you're saying to be able to introduce yourself as a CEO and introduce yourself as a writer, like this is how our identity deepens and broadens over time. And I'm just curious, as you speak about this with great clarity today, what was that journey like for you? And you've alluded to it a little bit here recently with the writing, but I'm more curious now with you as a CEO. When you think of you, the business woman, that you are. How did that evolution sort of come to where it is today, where you're so able to sort of confidently present yourself in this form of identity, if you will?
Thanks. I think, again, it probably started out, we needed somebody to manage the company. At first, I was only peripherally involved. It was kind of a hobby business. And here's first an encouragement to women who might be out there taking time to raise their children and not doing maybe much else, or not working outside the home, or working outside the home part-time, or even working full-time, but really concentrating all of their energy on their children. This was the decision that I made. I mean, I worked, but I mostly, my life when my kids were little was my kids. And that was hard and boring. And I write about this in the book, and I didn't get a lot of outside, atta girl, Maria. You just, it felt like the right thing to do, but it didn't give me it didn't fulfill a lot of my sort of needs for being told that I was doing a good job. But I reminded myself, and I tell my kids this too, this is such a short duration. This period where your children are young, it's worth putting aside other things, and you have plenty of time to do, everything that you want to do. So at any rate, as the kids were growing, and they need you less, they still need you, but they need you less. And my kids still need me in their 30s, but they need you less. Yeah. So I had this time, and we had this sort of what we called a hobby business, and it was becoming more serious. The bikes were selling pretty good, and we needed a leader. And I just said, I'm going to be the leader. And Jim said, okay, you're the CEO, Jim, my husband, who is the financial backer. And I was like, CEO, that's chief executive. That doesn't sound like anything I have the skills for, but I started just thinking of myself that way, and am acquiring the skills. It's been 15 years, still acquiring the skills to be a good and effective leader. And also, as you said, sort of in my identity, again, I read about this in the book. It's like, what are your strengths? And I am not like a authoritative top-down leader. I'm very much a collaborator to a fault, where I'll like ask 100 people their opinions and then have trouble dithering over what the right thing to do is. Right. So, but I learned that that is who I am in part, and I need to use those skills in my leadership, and not to feel embarrassed about the fact that I'm not maybe a classic CEO. And we talked about what we like in our business, and we all like to eat. So we, when we hire somebody, we make sure that they're kind of foodies too, because we're gonna enjoy some meals together. So anyway, just sort of I took on the identity right away in a verbal sense. I am the CEO, and I would sign my name that way. And then I acquired the confidence through just gaining skills over time, and I accepted my weaknesses, and I continue to find them and try to accept them. And the company it's growing. It's not making us millionaires. So I'm not sure, when we look back on this, will we say, was that a good, having Maria as CEO, was that a good decision? It certainly has been fun for me, and I've learned a lot. And that's what we keep when we talk about it. When my husband and I, who own the company, talk about it, we say, it doesn't really matter, because we're learning. It's incorporated so many important things in our lives, like, activity and cycling, and bringing the joy of cycling to so many people. I mean, there's so many people who have written me emails thanking us for the product that we have created that allows them to ride fast and far with comfort.
Yeah. And it's all about that lens, right? What lens are you choosing to look at results, performance, however you want to put it? What lens are you choosing to look at that through? And there's something about the journey of your life as a CEO starting with a need. Right? There was this true need for you to step in and do this thing. But even in that moment where you can look at the title and be like, that doesn't sound like me, or you can look at the position and be like, oh, wow, that's a lot to take on, you were still able to say, I'm going to step into this as who I am. I'm not going to step into this as some book that I read in terms of, this is what they say, this is the square box that the CEO is supposed to be inserted into this square hole. Like that's not what you said. You said, like, this is our organization, this is our company, and right now they need a CEO, and I've been called up to do that. and I have an opportunity to step into this as who I am, knowing that I have my strengths, and even some of those strengths can evolve into weaknesses at times. And then I have my weaknesses too. And I'm going to show up with all of that. And I'm going to learn as I go, knowing all of this about myself. And I think even just hearing you talk about the way you've measured the success through that lens of people reaching out, people telling you like, hey, I get to not only ride these crazy distances that I get to do, but you've allowed me to do it with comfort. And for them, maybe that was the final resistance that they needed to break through in order to actually take on these monumental tasks as you have taken on, which is that of riding across an entire continent, and so it's just being able to say like, hey, listen, this was the determining factor. I knew I couldn't do this. And I remember reading that at the start of your book. It was like, there's no comfortable way to do this in a basic bike. I'm going to need some form of comfort. And I know there's no pillow on earth that can make me comfortable on a normal shaped bike. So how do I do this? And I just think that part of the book and that part of your journey, and even just hearing that is actually a lens that you look through in terms of the success of the company, is that people are just simply giving you that feedback. You allow me to do things with the comfort that allows me to simply do it. Were it not for the comfort, maybe I wouldn't be doing it.
And I've had customers say, your product saved my life, because I was discouraged. I couldn't, do what I wanted to do, and your product enabled me to do that. So that's very gratifying. And in the end, the reason why we're doing it, because it was great for us. We experienced joy. I like, the book's called Do Tough. So doing hard things. I mean, I have always been, since I was a very little girl, very persistent and I can remember a time when I was working on a piece of furniture back in the day. I guess it's kind of been revived now, but it used to be when I was a little girl, people were stripping furniture and repainting them. And my parents were doing a lot of that. And they gave me a piece of furniture I was interested in. They gave me a piece of furniture to do that too. And so I spent hours and hours and hours, several hours each evening for many weeks, stripping this piece of furniture. And what was underneath it was not good, and so finally, but I was just determined to keep, trying to do something with what was, really just not a quality thing. And finally, my dad came to me and said, we have watched you and we love your persistence and your determination, but this is not worth it. This is a piece of junk. Let's get rid of it and get you onto something better. So doing hard things and being uncomfortable and persisting through difficulty has always been part of my personality. But as an adult, like learning when, and as a child and throughout my life, learning when to apply those, that natural sort of personality bent. And what makes me, like when I'm in the middle of something hard, like when I was working on that piece of furniture, when I was in RAM, Race Across America, like how was people say, how were you able to keep going? And, I've thought a lot about that. And I think that my particular talent is not looking too far ahead, being very short-sighted, which sounds funny, but it's really not overwhelming myself with the big task, but just putting my head down and doing the very next thing, which is a huge theme in the book.
Yes, it is. And we're definitely going to get to that, because I think you're quite organically moving us towards the competitive side of you. And, we've got a good feel now from the career trajectory and how you've gotten to where you are today. But you're alluding to almost a really nice sort of collaboration, if you will, between the career and between the competitor here, in the sense that you're acknowledging that you have this persistence to do difficult things. But life has taught you to know when to actually double down and keep on going and know, like, sometimes like, oh, this is a lost cause. Get out now before you lose, more weeks and
more of your life.
Years of your life. Exactly. So like, that's the CEO part of you talking, while the competitor is certainly present at the same time. But I'm just curious now, from almost like a Genesis story, like where did you, and I love that story that you provided in relation to your parents, but now just from an adult perspective, when did you maybe notice, like, okay, I'm actually starting to get a grasp of this competitive self, in the sense of, I now know that I will persist through difficulty, but I also know that I will do it in a more logical, maybe strategic way, at this, whatever juncture this maybe was in your life? Can you maybe figure out or pinpoint a time where you felt as though you were starting to maybe even master that quality?
Oh, I'm not sure I've mastered that, but I do remember when I realized that as an athlete competitor,
Mm.
I had something that was going to help me a lot. And I was doing it was early in my competitive days, and I was doing ultra cycling, which is anything over 100 miles. I can't remember if it was a 12-hour or 24-hour race, but I was the person amongst all the people who had the most miles, men and women. And I remember as during the event, it was like a loop or something that I would see people stop and rest. And I would think, if you just kept going, you'd so I guess I realized then that I had the ability to just keep going. When things got uncomfortable, the self-talk that I have is, yes, this hurts. Yes, this is uncomfortable. But the only way to finish is just to keep moving, and stopping isn't going to really help. And so I realized that this persistence that I had in other areas of my life was a really great asset in athletic events, especially in endurance events. But it's true even in non-endurance events, because that kind of thing happens in your training. That's when you're pushing yourself through a really uncomfortable workout, and you're saying, I could stop, I could stop and relieve this pain, this burning in my thighs or whatever, or I can just push through and add the expression is a penny in the jar, add another little layer of fitness and it's not just physical fitness, but it's psychological fitness. So, and then, I've always had people around me who have said, enough. And it seems that I've had the right combination of people who've said, you can keep going, and people who've said, that's enough. You can stop with honor now. You don't have to keep on after this thing. So, I am still learning when to stop, and aging has been really humbling. I turned 60 this year, and, your body just doesn't do what it did, I think about even being 50. I mean, 10 years ago, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but there's a lot that goes on. And, I just can't make the power numbers. I can't do the things that I could do at 50, even with the best, training and nutrition. So it's humbling, and that's good. It's good. It's good to have limits. Limits are there's something to make you feel safe and push up against, but they keep you, anyway. So I don't.
Well, I was just going to say that there is a mastery component to everything that you're actually explaining here, in my opinion. Because so many of our listeners, they're either active, very fit individuals, or they're entrepreneurial, and I think so much of what you're talking about here, especially that latter factor, the entrepreneur. There's so many opportunities on any given day for an entrepreneur to be so close to some sort of breakthrough, and for whatever reason to not keep going. And I've only been a business owner for 18 months, and I've lost count of the amount of moments already in just those 18 months where I've been at these crossroads where I've detected, hey, you're onto something. There's something here. You just need to keep going right now. And it may be super slow. It may seem like this is the most steepest incline that you can possibly take on right now. But all you just need to do is keep going. And whether that's with creativity, whether that's with reaching out to people, whatever it is, there is this ability just to notice like you're onto something. And that support system, as you alluded to, can be very helpful with something like that. But at the same time, how do you mentally have the capacity to just look at yourself in the mirror, or just sit there with yourself and meditate and pray on it and just think, I just need to keep going. I just need to keep going right now and focus on that penny in the jar mindset, as you alluded to, because like I said, that isn't normal. That is something that the minority are able to do. And it is why people are able to do crazy feats such as ride across an entire continent on a bike. That is what allows people to do that. I would any more thoughts on that, because I would love to transition into the book right now.
Yeah, I just there is a phrase that came from my husband's side of the family, and we thought it was some kind of great philosopher that we didn't know who said it, but we'd all memorized it, and we learned later that it was just some kind of an advertisement. But the phrase is the horizon is littered with the bleached bones of those who, with victory in sight, stop to rest.
Oh, wow. Wow.
This is likely just some, some Fifth Avenue marketer,
Right.
but it is such an evocative view. And so I memorized this long ago. Jim taught it to me. And I've used it, in my mind so many times. The horizon is littered with the bleached bones of those who, with victory in sight, stop to rest. So I try to think of that when I'm wanting to stop to rest.
I love that. I wrote down immediately 22 and a half minutes quote. So that one's going to be copied and pasted.
It's certainly not mine. And I can't tell you where it's from, but
Yeah,
it's been a helpful and because we know it's not somebody great who said that, we always chuckle, a little humor when we say it, and we say it to each other all the time.
I love that. What a wonderful way to transition now into the book. As you mentioned before, do tough. And sometimes I try to sort of explain people's books or their work on their behalf. And I don't want to do that right now because I will not do it justice. And so what I want to do is just give you the space in, Maria, just to really introduce the book to everybody listening and tell people what you think people need to know about it.
Well, thanks, Steve. I first want to say that the book exists. There are some things that I take on, but usually the really great things that I take on, somebody else pushed me to do, which is funny because listen to the people around you. People who love you will push you to greatness. Yeah. And so this book exists because of mostly three people. One, my daughter, Genevieve, who always said, you got to write this book. This book is, people need to hear what you have to say. Kelly Palace, my sister-in-law, who also, has been one of the great encouragers in my life, who said, you can do this, you should do this. And then you in our work together, because for me, it's putting my head down and doing something quietly, and, just working really hard is natural, but creating something that I'm going to put out there in front of other people is very frightening for me, very frightening. Here I made this, and I'm very susceptible to people's opinions. And I know that this is not literature. This is not scholarship. This is just what was in my head. This is my story. Mm-hmm. Is terrifying. And you gave me the courage to make it happen in part. So thank you for that. Of course. So the book came out about because, the story is the story of me completing Race Across America in 2013. We're on 10 years, about 10 years ago this month. I was doing Race Across America in 2013. And at the same time, my sister had been diagnosed with brain cancer, glioblastoma multiforme. And so in my frustration and just utter anger and powerlessness that I experienced with her diagnosis, I wanted to do something physical and something hard and something just, I think some people put their fists through doors and walls when they get mad. I mean, for me, that was Race Across America. I knew it would be really hard and, take tremendous devotion, work, and money, and I just wanted to do it because I thought this was a platform, the biggest platform available to me as an ultracyclist, to raise money for brain cancer research. And that was the conclusion I'd come to, that, as my mother-in-law used to say, if a problem can be solved with money, it's not a problem. And so it was clear to me that there wasn't enough money in brain cancer research, still isn't. Yeah. And so this was a goal to go out there and do this hard thing, kind of relieve my own physical itchiness and desire to just suffer in the face of my sister's illness and my grief over it. And then to try to raise money for her. Really, I think in some magical part of my brain, I thought I could raise enough money that there'd be a treatment that would cure her and that she would live. That was my deep desire, that I would grow old with her. She's my best friend and just an important part of my life. I address that more in the book. So Yeah. So the book, it tells the story of Jenny, my sister, and Race Across America, kind of, in parallel. And also because I am who I am, it it encourages, it tells, kind of the things that I've learned about how to get through tough things. I can say I probably know more about how to do hard physical things than I do about how to survive
Hmm.
suffering. Because as much as, we've all suffered, and I've suffered some, but I haven't suffered as much as many people I know. But
Mhm.
I've observed people, and I've observed how they do, and how people do well, how they manage. So the book has a lot of that in it. I really hope it encourages anybody who reads it.
Well, you know that I've read it, and and it certainly is encouraging, and it's inspiring, and it's motivating. And one thing I think is just really fitting is that when you think about, I know this has been in you for a long time, and it's taken you a long time to get it out on paper to now being published. And just to be clear, when you go from writing stuff to actually putting it out there, you become an author. So it's time to get used to calling yourself an author. Trust me,
Yeah.
I'm about 9 months into that, and I still haven't gotten used to it. So it takes time. It takes time. But the part I find just so beautiful is that we're right at 10 years from when you took this on. And I think there's something about that. And I know you're a woman of faith, as I am a man of faith. And so, there's a timing element there that it has to be recognized.
Yeah.
It honors what you accomplished and what you did, and the sheer worthiness of the cause that came with that feat as well. And the one thing I don't want to do is give away some of the. I mean, I already knew a lot about you, but I learned so much more about you too, especially the process of actually achieving what you achieved. I didn't realize the amount of adversities that came with it. Now, you may call me naive when you're talking about a 3,000-mile bike race, but at the same time, I think there's so much more in just that story alone, before you even get to the way in which you tie in ways to pull these lessons that you took from it and then turn that into encouragement. And I think that is such a vital part of this that I'm glad that you alluded to, because I certainly was going to, is that this isn't just about simply highlighting, hey, things are tough and this is what toughness looks like. There's a solution component here too. And I think that's so important, is that in many ways you were presented a problem in life. And those come in all different shapes and sizes, and certainly the responses to those come in different shapes and sizes too. But what you've been able to do with your response is not only respond the way you responded physically, but you've now taken it one step further, and you've said there were lessons from that response that can now be turned into encouragement to just about anyone who's going through whatever adversity they might be going through within their life. And so I just want to give you that acknowledgement here on a public platform first and foremost. I think you did that wonderfully. And
Thank you.
secondly, I would also just love to ask you, from this encouragement standpoint, there's a teaching component to the book. And I'm just curious, the competitor that you are, you've chosen to write this book, but now there's this part of me that's like, okay, people are going to want to come and learn more about these teachings that you offer through this book. Do you feel as though that was a part of this that you're ready to maybe take on now? Is that there will be this sort of next step where people are going to say, I got the encouragement and now I'm curious for even more? Like, has that part even started to hit you in any way yet?
Honestly, that never occurred to me. Oh, wow.
Well, you're a teacher. I think it's
Yeah,
important
I
for you to
am.
recognize that you're a teacher.
Yeah, I that's how I interact with people I love. I hope that I listen and encourage. The book is more about speaking than listening. And that's where some of my fears about putting it out there are, because I I know that some people who are suffering, and interestingly, since I finished the book and before I published it, I've had 4 very good friends, people very close to me, suffer from very serious illnesses. And I've given them the book, but I've thought, this book doesn't touch what you're going through, 12 weeks of horrible chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants and, and everything. So I hope yeah. And to answer your question, if there's a need out there, and if I can help fill the need for more encouragement, then I'm certainly available to do it. But it hadn't been something that I'd really honestly thought about. I was just really worried that this would cheapen some people's suffering. That was kind of my gravest concern about the book, is that they'll read and go, this doesn't help me at all. She doesn't understand anything about my pain.
Yeah, and the part of anything like this again is you put yourself out there, and there may be people that respond that way, sadly.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
the advocate for human growth that I am reads a book like this and just says, okay, listen, life is going to kick you at some point, and it may kick you super hard, and it will hurt. But there's almost a way to rationalize it too. And I think that is what you did very well with the book, is that you're actually able to simplify some of the chaos that comes with these really difficult times. Because it does, like, as you alluded to, when you first found out about your sister, it was just like energy all over the place. You just wanted to jump out of your skin, and you didn't know what to do. And that's the chaos that I'm talking about. And what you're able to do here with this book is you're actually able to just say, I see the chaos, and I'm going to try to just pull it in here. I'm going to try to simplify it. I'm going to try to make it seem like it's something that you can digest, let's say.
Yeah.
And so I think that's wonderful that you were able to do that first and foremost. But I'm curious now, just as I allude to that sort of thought, how are you maybe still using all of this insight that you provide in your book? How are you actually still using this to this day? Because I know, like you said, you were hoping to live a long life with your sister. You were hoping that this would cure all sorts of things. And here you are now in this day. I'm just curious how you still maybe even rely on the very, resource that is your book yourself.
Yeah. Well, when I read my book, I'm reading it out loud now for Audible publication, and I'm like, wow, I need to remember that, because there's some good stuff thing that I made up. It's all ancient wisdom. A lot of it is and a lot of it is from God. It's just basic stuff. But yeah, you have to be reminded of it when you're in a hard place. In fact, I just called a friend yesterday for encouragement, and she basically quoted the book back to me. So that's one thing that I've gotten better at, is reaching out for help. I mean, that's one of the chapters in the book. I think we can get so caught up in pain that we forget, or we're not even able to reach out for help. And there's so much help to be had out there. We carry, as when my sister was diagnosed, I was just beside myself. And then the rest of it was, when she died, of course it was awful, but it was a progression, of dealing with it and watching her die slowly, really. But yeah, what I've gotten better at, and what's in the book is, when you're, the first thing to do probably when you're choosing to do something hard, we talk about in the book, it's not an original concept to me, but this chosen versus unchosen suffering. When you're choosing to do something hard, or something bad happens to you, and often bad things happen to you very suddenly, and you don't know what to do. And the first thing to do is just to cry out for help, for help from God, for help from, your neighbors. Sometimes you can't even, all you can do is just yell help before you go under the water. And that's a really important thing. I would encourage anybody who might be listening to this, who's struggling, who's hurting in any way, who's suffering, to reach out, because we are made to help each other. We're made to help each other.
Yeah, no, I love that sentiment, and it's been shared on the show a number of times. And I think the part that's always frustrated me still to this day is the fact that is still considered a sign of weakness. Is that asking for help is some sort of sign of weakness. And I couldn't disagree more, in the sense that I think it's one of the bravest things to do. I do. I think it's one of the bravest things a person can do is approach someone and say, listen, I've been holding on to this thing, or I've got this burden, and I would love to actually see if you would be open to sharing this burden with me, or at least supporting me in the carrying of this burden. And I think that's something that, can never be said enough. And if you are someone that is, to your point, Maria, if you are someone that feels the need to get help, have that courage. Have that courage to go ahead and ask.
It does take courage.
It does. Well, as you know, I could talk to you all day. And I think one thing I from time to time on this show, I love asking this particular question. And so I'm going to ask it to you because knowing the competitor that you are, I think just with the sort of diversity that we've gone with today, there could be a variety of answers to this question. So it's why I want to ask it. Is when you put your head on a pillow at night, how do you look back on your day and say, today was a win? Today was a win. How do you actually put a day in the win column? How are you measuring your days, the competitor within you? How do you satisfy that competitor come the end of the day?
That's a great question. I as you mentioned earlier, I'm a person of faith. So when I hit the pillow at night, I talk to God. And I think again, I mentioned this in the book, one of the best things we can do is look for what I call grace. Look for anything that's funny or sweet or positive. And this is especially true when times are hard, but when times are good too. So I think when I hit the pillow at night, I ask God to help me see what was good about this day and what were the moments of grace, that I was sometimes you can get very blind to the good things depending on your mood or whatever. And it's helpful to really look for those, I guess some people keep a gratitude journal. I guess that's kind of the same concept as but sometimes it's not just gratitude. Sometimes it's just funny. Like I often think, what was silly or what was an amazing coincidence about today? And then I try to surrender all of the things that didn't seem to go well, that were problematic. That's how I end my days.
Yeah. In seeing the good and also seeing the problems, but in both cases, finding ways to find grace in both of those two. That's wonderful. I'm actually cooking up this whole philosophy on what I'm going to slowly call the being a parent at Disney method, which is something that I've experienced now a few times, where you spend about 98% of the day screaming and running around. And then there's these 2% moments in the day where you just can't wait to do this again tomorrow, and so I'm hearing a lot of that in what you're saying here, is that there's that ability to just to sort of say, you know what, I need to see the good. I need to find the good in this day. And if there was any stuff where I maybe got in my own way, I need to find the grace that is required to almost to come past that, come through that, so I can start fresh, so to speak, tomorrow.
Yeah. Life is a tapestry, and it's the black threads that make the yellows and blues and greens look good.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. On that note, wonderful way to bring this interview to a close. But before I let you go, Maria, I want you to provide everyone any piece of information that they could possibly need to access you, to access the book, et cetera, et cetera. So fire away.
Oh, great. Thanks. Well, you can find out about the book by going to Amazon and searching Do Tough Maria Parker. You can find more easily, you can go to mariapparker.com, and that'll tell you all about me and the book and take you to the book. And then if you're interested in brain cancer research, go to 3000milesToAcure.com. We're continuing to work to raise money for brain cancer research. And if you want to ride a bike in comfort, go to cruisebike.com and read about our amazing bikes.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider it down in Louisiana, but there's no such thing as comfortable cycling in June. It doesn't matter how recumbent that bike gets. When it's 98 degrees outside and humid, there is no such thing as a comfortable ride.
That's true. You got the winter times though.
Exactly. But Maria, thank you so much. We didn't even get on Champions Mojo, and you know what? It's okay, because Kelly's been on before, and we talked a whole bunch about it then. And so, if you're listening, I'm sorry we didn't give Champions Mojo the shout out that it deserves. But if you do need another podcast in your cycle, please go check out Champions Mojo as well. Maria, such a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this so much, and I'm going to say to you now publicly what I said to you privately before we got started. I am proud of you. I'm so excited for you, and I wish you so well on this journey, not just as a CEO, but now as an author as well.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Career Competitor. And before you leave, be sure to take advantage of your free one-time discovery call with me to see how I can be of service to you as a coach or potentially even your team. Depending on what it is you're looking for at this point within your career, I want to be able to serve you with 30 minutes of my time to see how I can be of use to you and help you on your path of continued growth towards your optimal self in order to find optimal performance. Be sure to reach out to me, steve@careercompetitor.com, or just head to the website careercompetitor.com. I look forward to connecting with you soon, and bye for now.